Hello everyone, I am your video host TP aka Triumphant Studios. Today we'll be doing a timeline video. This timeline will reflect on the history of the Northwestern Railway, aka the standard gauge railways of Sodor. The reason I said railways is because many of the branch lines were their own railways in the past, and later on they conjoined those railways and therefore the connection was called the Northwestern Railway, run by the Fat Controller of course. I wanted to do a narrow gauge timeline first before this one because my friend Duncan Gaming already inspired me to do a video of that. So yeah, but I decided to put that off for a while because I wanted to do a standard gauge version first. And by the way, go check out Louis Scarloy Railway Timeline video. It could inspire you to do your own, link in the description. So, what took me so long to plan this video? Well, I had to try and categorize what I can fit into my timeline, as I don't want to make a giant 2-hour long video, or else the editing process will be a lot slower than usual. So, let's go over those categorizations, shall we? Number 1. I will of course put the year on the bottom left corner of the screen so you know what year the event takes place in. I won't really say months though, mostly. I'll also sometimes state the seasons, like summer, spring, autumn, or winter. That also includes a certain holiday. Number 2, since we're only doing the Northwestern Railway, the Scarloy Railway, the Miniature Railway, etc. will be excluded from this video, as this is a timeline focused on the standard gauge stuff. I will do separate timelines of those railways at later dates, as either a part 2 or a part 3, who knows. Number 3. This is the most important rule as I want to address this most of all. If I don't address an event in which I skip that event, it's just due to it being pointless to explain or just bad and or unrealistic. Sorry, jet engine, that means you get the boot. Number 4. And this is the final one. This is not railway series or TV series accurate. It's also not a factual timeline. This is my personal timeline, my headcanon. So if you have your own headcanons, let me know. I'd love to see what your own ideas are. So, without any further ado, let's get started from the very beginning. The timeline begins in 1870. A railway from the busy town of Wellsworth to the harbor at Brendam was constructed and was run by 4 engines at the time. In 1885, a line from Tidmouth to Elsbridge was constructed and also ran through the gigantic town of Knapford. It also had a line running up to Farquhar, which was built a little later, and it had a line that went to the harbor behind the town of Tidmouth. This was called the Tidmouth, Knapford and Elsbridge Light Railway. It was run by a fleet of coffee-pot engines built by the current Fat Controller at the time. One of these coffee-pot engines was named Glyn. Unfortunately, 3 of the coffee pots couldn't be useful anymore since they proved to be unsuccessful in steaming most of the time. So they were scrapped, leaving Glyn all alone, who was the only one who managed to steam properly. In 1896, coal mines were dug in the east of Sodor's mountain range. They built a town to serve these coal mines in which it was named Great Waterton. It was run by a fleet of tram engines. In 1903, a tramway line was constructed from Haltra to Arlesdale End. It was run by a fleet of tram engines similar to the ones at Great Waterton. One of them was named Toby. In 1916, a railway line that formed around the headlands was constructed, running through the station towns of Tidmouth Halt and Tidmouth Bay, just south of the main Tidmouth town. 1945 was the end of World War II. And so all the lines, including the Wellsworth and Sudbury Railway, the Tidmouth, Knapford and Elsbridge Light Railway, all came together to form one big railway, the Northwestern Railway. The line was constructed by 2 engines that arrived to help out with it. They were both named Edward, number 2, and Thomas, number 1. Edward trialed with the express for a bit, but it proved to be too heavy for him to handle. So, a new engine called Henry was brought to Sodor that year. He pulled the express for a while, but unfortunately he couldn't function properly, though he was given the number 3. So this led to the fact director, or controller of the railway, purchasing an A1 Pacific from Doncaster named Gordon. He proved to be very successful, reaching 100 miles per hour just like his brother named the Flying Scotsman. Gordon was earned the number 4 later that day. As the days continued, Edward began to be used less and less compared to the bigger engines. On one fateful day, Edward finally got his chance to come out of the shed and prove the others wrong. The next day, Gordon gets assigned to take a goods train and gets stuck on a hill. Edward kindly helped him out, but Gordon didn't say thank you to Edward in response. This hill was later named Gordon's Hill, and remains that way to this day. In the spring of 1946, Henry became worried that the rain would spoil his paint, so he hid in a tunnel and refused to come out. Many attempts were done, but to no avail. Henry was bricked up in the tunnel for a while. The tunnel was later named Henry's Tunnel, which, like Gordon's Hill, remains to this day. About a month later, Gordon burst his safety valve and Edward had to come help out. He tried to push the coaches, but to no avail. Henry offers to help Edward, and he does end up helping in the end. Later on, Thomas kept waking Gordon up, and this led him to pay Thomas out by pulling him all the way to Wellsworth. When Thomas got back to the yard and stayed there for another week, he tried to pull Henry's train, but he was too excited to wait for the coaches to be coupled, and so he left them and the passengers behind. They do try again afterwards, but Thomas was made fun of after that experience. He tries pulling Edward's trucks and becomes a runaway until he stops at Marin. The Fat Controller purchases a mixed traffic engine called James. He had wooden brake blocks, which means they could easily catch fire. At the time of his arrival, James was painted black before getting his red coat, as seen in the 2015 movie The Adventure Begins. He had his famous crash, and Thomas comes to his rescue. Thomas had also earned his very own branch line that ran up to Farquhar, and met up with one of the abandoned coffee pot engines on his first run on the line. In 1947, the line around the headlands was closed due to a lack of trains running to it. Later on, James tore a hole in one of the coach's brake pipes, and the driver had to use a bootlace to fix the issue. He also tries pulling some trucks up a hill, only to lose half of them going up, and pulls the express for Gordon after he got diverted onto the loop line. Thomas had his little own events on his branch line too, like leaving his guard behind, getting fish in his boiler, and meeting 2 new friends named Terrence and Bertie. The former was a tractor with caterpillar treads who ended up helping Thomas from a snowdrift, and the latter was a bright red bus with an enthusiasm to race Thomas, but did still manage to run on time. The big engines went on strike because one had to pull the express backwards, one had spun around on the turntable like a top, and one was sprayed by an elephant. This leads to the Fat Controller purchasing a small green saddle tank engine in which he named him Percy, and was the number 6 on the NWR. Henry later had troubles preparing enough steam. This leads to the Fat Controller getting some special Welsh coal for Henry. It has proven to be a successful, it proved to be a success. Back on Thomas's branch line, he almost hit an avalanche after seeing Mrs. Kindly's red dress waving out the window. Even when she was ill in bed. Jeez. In the winter, Henry pulled the Flying Kipper until he had his crash and was sent away to be overhauled at Crewe. Henry later came back in February of 1948 with a larger firebox. He thankfully didn't need Welsh coal anymore after that. Back on the tramway where Toby worked, he was the only one left as his brothers were withdrawn from service as road vehicles started taking over their jobs. Toby had his very own coach called Henrietta for company. One day, the Hat family decided to go on holiday to this line, and that's when they met Toby for the first time. When Toby's old railway closed, Topham purchased him and he became the number 7 engine on the NWR. He also helped out Thomas's issue with the policeman as well. James criticizes Toby and Henrietta and considers them dirty objects. Karma bites him in the back, and James crashes straight into some tar wagons. Toby later uses the same words James said from earlier against him. Christmas came, and Thomas and his friends planned to give a thanks to Mrs. Kindly for helping out the year before. They ended up throwing a Christmas party at Tidmouth Sheds, and yeah, that's the end of 1948. In 1949, Great Waterton unfortunately was abandoned due to the coal mines drying up, and so, as a result, the town of Great Waterton could no longer be serviced. So everyone in the town went to new towns, and so Great Waterton was left abandoned. A couple of years went by, and in 1952, Gordon encounters a cow on the girder bridge. He attempts to shoo it away, but to no avail. Henry tries the same thing, and again, to no avail. Silly engines. The cow eventually reunited with her calf in the end. In 1953, Edward had some stuff going on, like Bertie chasing him down with Thomas's passengers, saving Trevor from the cutter's torch, and saving a runaway James who had no driver. Edward was sent to the works to be mended soon after. Trevor did have a chance to go to Tidmouth Harbor to help out with the clearage. In 1954, Percy had an encounter with a signal in which Gordon and James told him about backing signals, which of course isn't real by any means, implying that Gordon and James played a trick on Percy after he did his tricks to them. The harbor at Tidmouth needed more engines to help out with its goods service, so Percy was asked to do so, while Topham purchased a Great Western engine named Montague, but wanted to be called Duck, because he waddled like a duck. While helping out, Percy meets a helicopter named Harold. They become rivals at first, until Percy wins a race against Harold, proving that railways aren't slow and out of date. Percy also had to take school children to their home. While en route, he gets stuck on a flooded track and tries to proceed onward. He does end up making it in the end. In 1955, the Sodor China Clay Company built their very own clay pits near the harbor at Brendam, and they acquired 2 yellow engines named Bill and Ben to work there. They would sometimes work at the harbor as well. Percy tells Bill and Ben about his bravery through the flooded track. Henry shoos everyone off, and Percy reminds Henry of his refusal to move from the tunnel. Karma comes to bite Percy in the back, and he rolls off the key into the ocean. In 1956, Sodor had its first ever diesel come to Sodor. His name was simply Diesel. He seemed nice and admirable at first, but his cracks started to show as Duck came into play. Diesel boasts to Duck of how diesels are revolutionary. Duck tries to make Diesel prove it by tricking him into pulling old trucks, and as a result, Diesel proves the exact opposite. Diesel wanted to get Duck back, so he decided to frame him and send him away to Wellsworth with Edward. When he arrived, Duck told Edward of his issue at the yard. Edward decided to give Duck something to do by helping him with his goods train. Edward unfortunately loses the train, and this results in the trucks bumping into the back of Duck, swerving onto the siding to avoid hitting James's coaches, and crashing into a barber shop. Duck is eventually rescued and sent back to the yard with all his friends. In 1957, Topham had purchased his 9th steam engine to help out with the work. He was surprised when he saw that 2 engines had arrived instead of 1. One was 57646, and the other was 57647, aka Donald and Douglas. Topham couldn't tell them apart and had them on trial for some time. Donald was number 9, and Douglas was number 10. In this timeline, the missing coach does not happen. While on trial, Donald tried to put some sense into the spiteful brake van. He ends up biffing the brake van, and he behaved better after that. Donald reverses and accidentally smashes into the signal box. James had to cover his work and asked Douglas to help him with his goods train, which ends terribly. That winter, a deputation was sent out to tell the Fat Controller about Donald and Douglas's reasoning for coming to Sodor. Topham, of course, confronts the engines about this, and in the end, the issue is resolved. The twins end up staying, and they officially receive their nameplates. In 1958, Bill and Ben lost some trucks after they shunted them into place. They discovered that a diesel had taken them. I also find it hilarious how they call it a diseasel, as it kind of sounds like a diesel having a disease of oil leakage. Not really though, but I mean it's kind of a funny word to say, honestly. Diseasel. The 2 engines managed to confront a green diesel named Boko who had mistakenly taken the trucks without knowing. When Gordon ends up wrong-roading to Brendam, Bill and Ben tease Gordon, and their comment frightens the living crap out of Gordon, And once Bucko comes, Gordon tells him to save him. Later on, Edward takes a visitor's train to Brendam Docks for Bill and Ben to take to the Sodor China Clay Company. When Edward heads back down the line, his crank pin broke, so he had to get his side rods taken off. He then proves himself that he can't give up. And after that, the big engine saw how hard Edward tried. And after that, they finally respected Edward at long last. On Halloween, Thomas, Percy, and Duck were assigned to go to the smelter's yard. While there, Thomas keeps on acting like a prick to Percy and makes fun of him for being afraid of ghosts. He gets payback from Duck, of course, which results in him racing all the way to Tim's sheds, escaping the haunted smelter's yard by the looks of his face. Christmas was nearing, and Thomas had to bring a Christmas tree to the station for the Christmas carols. He gets stuck under the snow, and Donald and Douglas come to his rescue. Let me say this: Christmas is saved! In 1959, Percy crashes into a luggage cart after trying to sneak up on the coaches. He ends up getting trousers, a top hat, and sticky jam all over him. In that year, the city of Truro visited Sodor, and Gordon, who saw him from afar, became jealous of the famous engine. He tries to go 100 miles per hour, yet again, but he loses his dome in the process while crossing the viaduct. Wow, Gordon, you just can't seem to stop going too fast, can you? In 1960, Thomas's branch line had to close down for maintenance. Thomas was sent to the yard, while Percy was sent to Brendam to work with Duck. While there, Duck wonders about the lands beyond the horizon. He soon realizes his self-worth on Sodor after taking an injured man to Bertie, who was later taken to Wellsworth Hospital. A week after, Thomas's branch line officially reopens, but Percy had to stay at the harbor for another few weeks because of the busy traffic the harbor was getting. As a result, Percy and Duck are exhausted from this. This leads to Diesel returning to Sodor to help out. Diesel was, of course, still in his old ways from when he first came to the island. Back on Thomas's branch line, Thomas had to cover for James, who faked illness to get out of work. And also, for those of you who don't know, Trust Thomas is an adaptation of the later episode in Season 4, Trucks. I mean, that's just for those who didn't know, and who are confused about the plot. As Thomas heads down the quarry line, he gets diverted onto the wrong track and crashes onto a car ferry. He was thankfully rescued soon after. In my headcanon, it's Toby who takes the trucks. Duck is still at the harbor with Percy. In 1961, the Fat Controller had discovered the old tracks that led through the headlands and wanted to reopen these places. He also became impressed with Duck's work in the yard and the harbor, so he decides to give Duck his own branch line. This included a full extension up to Haltraw, but the stations on the southern line had to be rebuilt first since they had been abandoned for a long time. 1962 was the year that Farquhar Quarry needed an engine of its own since the quarry traffic began to pick up. They acquired a diesel engine with cowcatchers named Mavis. One fateful day, Mavis got stuck by stopping in the wrong place near the crossing. Toby, of course, had to help her, but Mavis comes to Toby's rescue after Toby nearly dangled off the edge of a bridge. Specifically, he basically almost committed a tightrope. Of course. Mavis now gets a chance to go down the line further. As a result, Mavis felt much happier to be on Sodor. In 1964, Douglas had to take a goods train to the other railway. While about to leave, he saw a Great Western engine just like Duck, accent-wise. His name was Oliver, and Douglas heroically decides to help both him and his brake van towed. The three end up making it past the border and onto Sodor safely at last. All the engines, including Topham, heard about Oliver's escape, and so Oliver and Toad were repainted into their Great Western colors. And at last, the line to Haltraw was finally completed. The other engines joked about it and called it the Little Western. Duck and Oliver were of course proud of this name, and ever since, it has stuck. Oliver also fell into a turntable well and had to go to the works. When he comes back in November, he meets a truck called Scruffy, and Toad plans to teach him a lesson after he and the other trucks sang in a chorus talking trash about Oliver, in which Toad's plan does work, only a bit too well. In 1965, Stepney made his visit to Sodor for the whole week, and for that whole week he was there, he had some interesting adventures, like meeting and getting to know lots of Sodor's engines, including Thomas, racing Caroline, and getting to see a Child Class 40 fail his engine after he tries to shunt the coaches into place, in which Stepney and Duck take the express train to Crovan's Gate, where Gordon was waiting to continue the journey. Stepney had to unfortunately leave Sodor soon after. While he would come back after some time, it'd be only once every few years. In early July 1966, Brendam Docks acquired its new crane called Cranky. Cranky saw himself above the engines, both figuratively and literally. One night, a storm hit Sodor and a ship ran aground and hit the sheds, which hit Cranky and caused him to tip over onto his side. Later on, 3 horrid lorries arrived to Sodor to help out with the goods traffic. All 3 of them crash, which in my opinion is hilarious, and they get sent away and never come back. Again, hilarious. The Fat Controller noticed that the line to Kirkronan hadn't been used in years since the Sodor Mainline Railway closed. In mid-February 1967, the Kirkronan branch line was officially restored along with its terminus, Kirkronan Station. It was on the opening day that Gordon plowed through the station wall after something had jammed inside him. Later that summer, Topham's mother, Dowager Hat, comes to visit Sodor and its railways. She even came to see her own son run the railway like a proper controller. In my headcanon, it's not Gordon and the Gremlin happening here, it's just a custom event I decided to add. In 1968, Oliver rediscovered the line of, well, Toby's old line, of course. After being accidentally diverted onto it, the station of Arlesdale End was fully restored for visitors to have tea and crumpets. Since the line was restored, Toby had moved back to his old line, and while there, he was involved in a giant flood by trying to cross a bridge but was floated away on it. Harold and Percy did all they could to help Toby, and soon enough, he was safe and sound once the rescue was over. A big party was held soon after the flood ended, and the dam mended. Oh, did I just rhyme again? 1969 was the year of smaller events, like Percy finding a good luck package for Mrs. Kindly's daughter's wedding, George causing trouble for the railway, James encountering a massive tree that nearly falls on top of him in the end, and Topham trying to look his best attending his wife's birthday party, but fails hilariously. He does end up making it on time with a bouquet of flowers. In 1970, when it was nearing Christmas, Thomas had to take a Christmas tree to a village on Toby's line. He does have some troubles involving his spare snowplow, but he and Toby make it in the end. Speaking of Toby, he helps Farmer McColl find his lambs in the snow by bringing a vet to the scene and offers to let the lambs stay in Henrietta. Such a clever idea for such a fantastic episode. In 1971, Diesel returns once again to prove he is better and stronger than Henry while he was away at the works. He does try to do so, but it results in Diesel crashing onto a barge that was 25 feet below him. Well done, Diesel, you klutz. This leads to Topham purchasing a dockside Diesel named Salty. His first day on Sodor started off with him going to Farquhar Quarry to help out with a big order of stone. He was later relocated to Brendam Docks and still works there today. In 1972, Gordon wanted to prove to Salty that he isn't too big for his buffers. Instead, Gordon proves the exact opposite. He unfortunately proves Salty's comment right and tumbles off the track onto farmland and stops outside a barn. Wow, Gordon. You're a klutz just like Diesel. But I mean, it's okay. What Thomas said just makes sense. In the summer of 1973, a new front loader is brought to Sodor to work with the Sodor Construction Company. His name was Jack. His first day was a bit troubling, but after saving Thomas from a collapsing bridge, he proves himself a hero to the pack, and is even a part of the team officially. Duck also meets a red double-decker bus named Bulgy, and he was very rude when he and Bulgy first met. Bulgy gets his just dues after getting stuck under a bridge, which has since been named Bulgy's Bridge. In 1974, the brickworks was getting old, so it had to be demolished. So they also had to clear out the rubble there. On one of these trips, Oliver and Ned were the ones to take care of the scooping and the demolishing. Oliver and the workmen tried several times to knock down the wall, but failed. That is, until Ned accidentally knocks over a giant chimney and it destroys the warehouse in seconds. Incredible. Also, Oliver found the skeleton of a dinosaur when they were clearing out a giant space for a swimming pool. In 1975, the construction vehicles were brought on to build a community center. It was on one of these construction days that Patrick flew onto his own concrete, and we don't know what happened after. I mean, we do, but we don't know what happens to Patrick. We don't know what his consequence is. I assume he got into trouble with Miss Jenny and was sent to... I don't know. Who knows? In 1976, May Day was coming to Stodor, so the stations were to be decorated. The Fat Controller allowed the engines to be decorated as well. Gordon unfortunately refuses to do this and describes being decorated as indignified. He gets instant karma when he races towards a May Day banner and gets it stuck across his face. As a result, he can't see. The driver states that they'll stop at the next station, and so the passengers at Wellsworth had to sit through a 10-minute delay after Gordon arrived. As Gordon was speeding down the line, still with the banner on, the driver sees Trevor, the traction engine, and attempts to apply the brakes, but Gordon smashes through the crossing and Trevor's cart of apples. They eventually get back to Knapford, but Gordon was 10 minutes late, and he still had the banner on, just with it being moved up so that Gordon could see where he was going. In this timeline, it's Henry that replaces Murdoch. Murdoch doesn't exist in this timeline. That Christmas, Oliver was complaining about the freezing snow until he found some interest in it after crashing into a snowman, after listening to Toad's advice, and after watching the children have a little fun in decorating him with a top hat and a little scarf around his face. In the summer of 1977, the fishing village was needing its own engine there. The Fat Controller brings a red Midland tank engine named Arthur to help out. Arthur has handled trucks before, it's just the trucks were different on the mainland compared to Sodor. How? Some were troublesome, but some were kind. Arthur has to deal with, of course, troublesome vans full of fruit that were meant to be taken to the market. On this trip, he crashes into the back of Duck's train after being pulled by the trucks down Gordon's Hill. In 1978, a giant storm struck Sodor in many different areas. After the storm, everything settled down soon enough, but some had trouble after the storm had hit. Brody tries to find a shortcut while taking the brass band to the concert, only to have Edward take them to it, Toby helping the miller after seeing the windmill destroyed to pieces, and Percy encountering the earth crumbling, in which Thomas took a different route while Topham sent workmen to mend the track immediately after Percy told him. In the summer of 1979, the station of Kelsthorpe Road was reconstructed with a brand new signal box at the junction to Kirk Ronan. While Thomas was heading back to his shed, he saw some runaway trucks headed for the station. Thomas managed to get ahead and stop at the runaway by warning the signalman to divert the trucks onto the nearby siding. In 1982, a Sterling single was purchased by the Fat Controller named Emily. On her first day, she accidentally took Thomas's coaches without knowing they were his. Emily soon makes up for it by trying to find Thomas to apologize, but instead comes across Oliver, who had broken down at a crossing. Emily pushes Oliver out of a runaway Thomas's way, and just in the nick of time, Oliver is saved. Emily earns her 2 new coaches soon after, and enjoys them very much. In 1983, passenger traffic began to pick up, and Topham decided to give Bulgy, the red double-decker bus, a second chance. One night as he was sleeping, the hens crept aboard him, and the next day, Bulgy had woken them up by swerving on the road to avoid hitting Tom Tipper, who is coming in the opposite direction. Emily recommends to Bulgy about the farmer selling vegetables around the island. Bulgy gets the idea of becoming a vegetable stand and remains this way for the rest of his life. Such a nice ending for this changed bus now turned vegetable stand. In 1984, Gordon became jealous of a new engine called Spencer who arrived to visit with the Duke and Duchess of Boxford. When Spencer gets stuck on Gordon's hill, Gordon comes to his rescue. This is the point where Gordon starts to change for the better. After that, Spencer, like Stepney, would only return to the railway every couple of years or so. In the summer of 1986, Thomas was sent to work at the quarry while Bill and Ben were away at the works being repaired. Thomas worked with Mavis, but he also had to work with diesel. When all the diesels break down after water has leaked into the new fuel, Thomas goes to the fuel depot for fresh clean fuel, and so he brings it to every diesel on Sodor who took this new fuel. Thomas is such a kind soul in this episode. I can't help but love him. In 1990, in the summer, a new airport was built for more tourists to visit Sodor. Prior, the only way to get to Sodor was by ship, and it's sad to say that it cost a bit too much for the people traveling to Sodor. So airplanes were the newest transportation from the other places to Sodor. This happens in these special calling all engines, in which that meant all the engines on Sodor wanted to help with the project. In 1992, Thomas happens to rediscover Great Waterton after being sent down the wrong track by Duncan. After spreading the news all over Sodor, all the engines want to help with the restoration. They even got Jack in the pack, of course. While that was happening, a new engine called Stanley arrived to help out. After all the issues with Thomas going missing, the town was restored to its former glory. These events can be found in the movie The Great Discovery. Also in this timeline, Stanley permanently works on the Great Waterton branch line and has his own shed there. In 2011, when Diesel tells Gordon that steam engines will be scrapped if they are old and clapped out, Gordon ignores this, but secretly, he fears it quite deeply. Gordon happily proves himself to still be a really useful engine when he thinks this will be his last trip before the cutter's torch. Gordon goes as fast as he can, and he rockets all the way to the docks, and in the end, Gordon wasn't scrapped, but his future had changed quite a bit. He had to retire from express service to make way for the next express engines named Pip and Emma. Gordon would still pull the express sometimes for anyone who wants their big blue engines back to show that he's not completely gone from pulling coaches. But Gordon's worrying was a reminder of his last ever express journey, and everyone remembers this instance of determination from Gordon in the current day. And speaking of current day, of 2025, Thomas and all his friends are still running on Sodor today. And the Railway series would be turning 80 years old on May 12th, since the first book was published in 1945.